now it's my honor to introduce Dr. Randy Nudo, who's the University Distinguished Professor and Vice Chair of Research, the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at the University of Kansas Medical Center. He was Kathleen's doctoral mentor from 1997 to 2002. And I think Kathleen really embodies the neuroplasticity principles, championed by Dr. Nudo. I do want to also share that we provided Kathleen with some prompts that might help illustrate some of the connections she has with the various speakers that you'll see today. And so the prompt that she received related to you, Dr. Nudo, was, can you recall a moment when this mentor challenged you and how you're grateful for it now? And her response was that it didn't take long since I met Randy until a challenge arose. Soon after I joined the lab, Randy told us we were moving to Kansas. Moving the lab gives me skills I'd use in starting my own lab. I enjoyed meeting a new department of people and moving to a place I'd only heard of in movies. Actually, just one movie. I'm so grateful to Randy for taking a chance on me and introducing me to the field of neurorehabilitation. It's a pleasure to invite you.
I'm going to show lots of pictures. And I feel so lucky not only to have known Kathleen for so long and to get to know what a wonderful person she is, but this is the first celebration like this I've ever been to where the mentors are still alive. So I feel really lucky. This actually is from a visit to Burke several years ago, and I was invited here, and Kathleen and I were able to meet up. But I'll show you some pictures, but I want to put things into a little bit of perspective. So back to 1996, it was actually somewhat of a pivotal year for me in my career. I'd just been promoted to associate professor. I had submitted the first renewal of my R01 grant and had some students, but I was really eager with a new grant coming on to have additional students. And I got an email from Kathleen across the street at Rice University that she was very interested in the work I was doing. We had just published a kind of a neat paper in Science that was getting attention. And so I said, well, come on and let's talk about it. And she came to my office. I could see Rice University from my office window. I said, wow, this, I started to learn a little bit about Kathleen, and we talked first about the science we were doing, because we had models in non-human primates of the effects of focal ischemia on motor behavior. And so I told her a bit about that, and she was extremely interested and very astute and was obviously well-read already, but she just didn't have a lot of lab experience. So, I pondered this. I said, wow, this is going to be challenging. I said, and so I said to Kathleen directly, and I've learned that that's the best way to converse with Kathleen is directly, because she is very direct. I said, Kathleen, I have to ask you, what do you think your limitations are? And she said, I haven't found them yet. I didn't quite hear her at first, or wasn't quite sure I understood. Kathleen, could you repeat that? And very boldly, she said, I haven't found them yet. And I was stunned. I was stunned at that moment. I'll never forget that. And, it was one of those moments that mentors always say, it's time to close the door behind them and lock it, because you want that student. And I wanted Kathleen in the lab once she told me that. And so Kathleen started to, we realized that she had some limitations. We had to figure out how to deal with that in a laboratory setting where we're doing microsurgeries on rats and monkeys. So, well, Kathleen, do you think this is a good idea? Should you even try to pursue the surgical part of it? And absolutely, she wanted to learn to do that herself. And so, I actually walked in, and this is some of her her mates. We'll see a lot of pictures of Kathleen as a young woman, and a lot of us with not so much gray hair. But and there's some really great people that just the guy in the back there worked in our lab, and you remember Archie, of course, and he is an orthopedic surgeon in Kansas now. So, and we have got a couple of people that have been with me for going on 30 years. And they're still with me. But we talked about the surgeries, and she wanted to learn, and so I walked in on one of the surgeries. Scott Barbay up at the there's this guy here. Scott taught everybody in my lab how to do surgery and work with Kathleen. And I went into the lab one day to see how she was doing. Could she really do this? And let's just say it was a sanguine environment. But Kathleen wanted to persist. And we decided, this probably isn't the most efficient thing to do for your dissertation. And we would have somebody else do the surgeries, but she really drove the experiments. And I think what she learned from that is that, she learned really what goes into these experiments. And so she knew firsthand exactly what was important in doing those surgeries. And at the time we were interested in some studies. Kathleen, I realized when she started looking at videos of monkeys with microinfarcts in their motor cortex, that she intuitively knew what to look for. And so this is just a slide from Kathleen's work, one of her first papers, where stereotypical behavior in a trained monkey, where they're doing finger flexion form supination to dig pellets out of wells. And right after the lesion, they more or less abandoned that strategy and picked up a new strategy. And we talked endlessly about why they would do this. And one of the theories was they just happened to come upon a random strategy, a random synergy that happened to reward them the first time, and then they persisted in that. And so this was really interesting, and I knew that Kathleen really had some special insights in how to analyze behavior in these monkeys with motor cortex lesions. And so when I told her that we were going to Kansas, I think this is already in Kansas, but she was already in Kansas, and she was probably saying, "What have I done?" But one of the things we had to work on during her dissertation was her communication skills. And so one of her first presentations to the department, she did really great, I thought, but I had listened to her give the talk 100 times. And people in the audience came up to me and said, I really didn't understand a lot of what she was saying. What can we do? I said, well, I'm not a speech therapist, but we're going to work on other ways that she can communicate. And so we worked out a balance where she would, I don't know if you remember this, we talked about, exactly the balance of putting the result sentence on the slide and printed in large block letters so that, okay, they're going to be reading that, but that's okay. They'll get the main point of each slide. And the next time she gave a talk, I'll never forget, the chair of the department came up to me and he said, what has happened with Kathleen's speech? It's so much better now. And it had nothing to do with her speech. It had to do with the way that she was communicating it to the audience. And I had a couple of other faculty members telling me the same thing. So I said, okay, this is working. But Kathleen was great at written communication. And she was successful in getting an F31 to look at functional segregation in motor cortex. And that was really because we were reading Jack Martin's papers. And this is just another one of Kathleen's mates, Sean Frost, who's also with me. But we were interested in sensory responses in motor cortex. And our inspiration was Martin and Guez. In fact, we read Martin and Guez so often, it became a 4-syllable word in the lab, Martin and Guez. And because Jack was doing this in cats, we really wanted to know in monkeys, and we found the segregation of cutaneous responses in the caudal part of M1, and monkeys were this particular monkey was a nice model for it. So Kathleen decided she was going to look at do a dissociation study and do lesions in either rostral or caudal motor cortex for her dissertation. And she found that there was actually a difference. And the most compelling difference to me was the fact that if you make a lesion in the caudal part of M1, that animals did something that looks like an astereognosia that Randolph and Sims at that time were reporting, where the monkeys would pick up a pellet and then look in their hands as if they didn't know it was there, and then eat the pellet. And they did this frequently. Eventually, after the first week or two, they stopped doing that because they were using visual guidance and were able to retrieve the pellet without looking in their hands. So they could tell that they had the pellet. So they stopped doing that. But there was really the first demonstration in a monkey, which is hard to do in a macaque monkey because this area is buried in the central sulcus. But Kathleen showed this difference, and it was I thought it was really remarkable. So Kathleen did really well in the lab. When she came to Kansas, things got better. There are a couple of people that are probably in the audience on Zoom that I'll talk about in a minute, but these are just a few pictures. And the result of her dissertation, 14 peer-reviewed papers from her time in graduate school, 3 first author papers, but Kathleen wanted to be involved in everything. There wasn't a study going on in the lab that she wasn't involved in directly. And so it was really a wonderful experience to have her in the lab. These are some of the people that were around, her contemporaries. And this was, everybody knows this, that has a successful lab with NIH funding, that you get your NIH R01 renewed because you have good students. And so Kathleen got me the subsequent third edition of the R01. And we've got a couple of great people that were successful at that time. It was a really a tremendous lab. Numa Dankos, who's now a professor at University of Montreal, and Ann Stowe, who I think is online. Hi, Ann, at the University of Kentucky. And so, she really had a tremendous impact on us. And I just want to end with my absolute favorite slide of Kathleen. This picture I'll show you was on my bookshelf after the day after Kathleen defended her dissertation. This was put on my bookshelf. It stayed there. Of course, back then our printer technology was not all that great for in-home printing, so it was all cracked up. So this photo is the moment we announced Kathleen was Dr. Friel, the first time she heard that. And can you see the pride on my face when she passed and I was able to call her Dr. Friel? Kathleen was very special. So go back to my office in Kansas now. And the last time Kathleen came to my office before she left for Columbia to join Jack, she gave me a book about how to be a mentor. Yes, you remember? You probably still have the same book. And I was a little offended at first. I said, wait a minute. The more I think about it, Kathleen is the mentor. They talk about the climate activists talk about the Greta effect. Well, in the world of people with disabilities, I talk about the Kathleen effect. And I love to talk about Kathleen because she has taught me many, many, many times more than I've ever taught her about science. She's taught me about life, and I appreciate that. I continue to follow her Facebook messages, her challenges with people that are naive about how people with disabilities, the challenges they face, and the discrimination they face. And I am just incredibly awed by Kathleen's courage. And so Kathleen, congratulations on this great milestone. And thank you so much for being my student.
To get me on up the rim in my career.
Yep, and you've gone over the top.
So much.
Thank you so much.